Hey Monica, I wanted to record a short video to help you navigate through the process of figuring out what I'd like you to do to change and update this job description. First of all, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and access and probably print out both the Word document and the PDF file. The Word document has an updated copy of your job description that you submitted to me, formatted the way that I'd like it. You had a different type font, and I want them all to look the same. That's the way it would look in the real world. So start any changes you make with that updated file that's attached to this feedback sheet. Also, look at the PDF file that's got my scribblings and scratchings and things on there. The purpose of this video is to try to help you understand what I put there. First of all, very good job on this job description. It's a solid A. The job summary is intended so that someone who is looking at all of our 14 jobs can get a very quick picture of what this is to decide whether they want to apply or not. So what you've got is pretty good. It does tell you as the candidate what the main things are that you would be doing, and having read that, you'd know whether you want to read any further or not. The essential functions, you've done a great job too. I added a sentence at the beginning saying something about accommodations that will be made, and then I tried to put it into a current structure. So instead of posts, ads, and so forth, post and organize and schedule and assist, I've already corrected that for you on your form. The only thing you might do there is think about if there's anything else that an HR assistant would do on a regular basis and add those in. Otherwise, it's pretty good the way that it is. Under the job context, the point is to answer basic questions that a candidate would have, understanding up front that these don't exist on a lot of job descriptions, but I want you to go through the process of thinking about this job in the bigger context. Supervision received answers the question, who's my boss? What's the chain of command? You've done a pretty good job there, but you want to probably make it very, very specific of who is my first level in terms of reporting. You've mentioned a couple of things there, and I might be confused as to which one I would go to first. So make it very, very clear who I go to if I have questions or concerns or things like that. You might also indicate whether this person is on site with you or whether they're in a different location, and how you might reach them if they're not here or if they're out. Under available guidelines, the question that we're trying to answer is, in the absence of my supervisor, what resources do I have to answer questions? And this is where you typically say there's an employee handbook, there's a personnel manual, there is online resources through our intranet, or we encourage you to join SHRM or things like that. But the guidelines that we're looking for are resources to help you make decisions when you have questions. So rephrase that for me. And list the kinds of things that you might have access to as an HR assistant if your boss is not there to answer a question, all right? Policies, procedures, manuals, websites, things like that. Consequence of error and accountability, section C, answers the question of what are the main things in this job that could pose a problem if they're done incorrectly or wrong, and what are the consequences if that happens. So when you think about the essential functions, about dealing with employees and answering questions, benefits and compensation and development and things like that, what could go wrong? I could give bad information. I could that's probably the main thing, is when it relates to benefits, I could mislead you or improperly advise you, or I could present information in a way that you think that it's mandatory when it's completely your own preference. I could mislead you. Those kinds of things are accountability. So those are the kinds of things that we as managers are going to be looking at you as the HR assistant to be able to do right. And then what are the consequences if we do that wrong? Well, the consequence would be that they sign up for the wrong benefit plan, which has an impact on the employee. If we get too many people signing up for the wrong plans, it could affect us financially. If we give bad information or we don't maintain confidentiality, which is probably one of the accountabilities, it's employee information is very sensitive, and you've got to be one of the accountabilities. Things that could go wrong is you got to make sure that you don't leak information that is private and sensitive. And what are the consequences? You could be fired if you do that. So that section, think about what might go wrong. You don't want to have a huge listing of things, but just general ideas of what's important in this job that we get right, And then what happens if we don't? Personal contacts answers the question, do I perform this job in a vacuum, don't interact with people, or do I interact with people? And if so, who? The HR assistant probably won't have a lot of external contacts unless it's vendors for various reasons, but you want to be able to specify to at least give the candidate an idea of what they're going to be interacting with, in what roles, and how frequently. So list the things. You've got some of the things like that. HR manager, director, employees, prospects. What about people outside the organization? But also, you've got some degree of this, but finish out the thought of how frequently. You're going to be interacting with employees every single day. They would probably want to know that. They might assume that, but don't make that assumption. Supervision exercise, part E, is, am I in charge of anybody else? As an assistant, probably not. So you will say, we'll have no direct or indirect reports. You might think about whether we would ever use them in kind of a supervisory role, unofficially, informally, if we have new hires. Or if we need to mentor people. So you might want to add that in if you think that's a reasonable part of this job. Physical demands, what is this job going to require of me in terms of strength, agility, concentration, things like that. So you've got some good stuff, no more than 30 pounds, lift equipment, long hours of sitting using office equipment. You're probably okay there. Just give it one more thought, see if there's anything else from a personal, physical standpoint that we would need to mention to them. Work hazards, everybody's going to comply with OSHA. That's a given. Think about it in a bigger context. Is there anything that we're going to ask this person to do, or is there anything about the environment that this person is going to be in that could create problems? Loud noises, repetitive sounds, the glare of a computer, any of those kinds of things. So you might want to think about the climate. Is it is it air-conditioned environment? Certainly staring at a computer, typing an awful lot. You could have carpal tunnel, and those could be work hazards, perhaps. Personal demands, how's this going to impact my family and my social life and whatnot? So you want to talk about people who might have to travel. You've mentioned that. But could this person ever go to any of our locations for benefits meetings or something? So you might not say it's not required. You might say that there's very, very little travel. We know in advance when it's going to be. You'll use your personal car and get reimbursed, that sort of thing. It's route probably day travel only, those kinds of things. But also, will they ever have to work holidays and weekends and overtime? That would be important to know. But overall, pretty good job on that section. Knowledge, skills, abilities. I couldn't come up with anything really that I would question about this. But with everything else, give it one last thought. See if there's anything else in terms of what they need to know to do this. You might want to say, knowledge of employee law or something like that. Skills, the typing and the personal interaction, whatever, the ability to understand things, all that's good. Under qualifications, the diploma is required, associate's degree is preferred. You might say or equivalent, because they may not have an associate's degree, but that's the equivalent of core and maybe a few major level classes. Remember that these are communication students, so they may not have a whole lot of those kind of major classes, but associate's degree or equivalent. Experience, make sure that you indicate whether it is required or preferred. You say up to 2 years, but you don't say if that's required or preferred. That's probably preferred. Other working experience also probably is preferred. On the last page, I got rid of that last section, which we would probably have on the document they would sign for their employee files, but not on the document they would glance at to see if they want to interview or not. Hopefully that answers the questions that you might have and addresses all of my scribblings. Email me or get in touch with me if you don't understand. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to your revisions. It's pretty clean to start with. Minor revisions will get this thing perfect, and we'll have this thing ready to go for our communication students. Thanks.